You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
A source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the province.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high, a lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar and Khatib.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm joined by a good friend of mine, somebody I've known for many years, Jill Canada. Jill, how are you doing today? Good to see you.
Doing great. How about you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to finally do this. We have a really interesting topic today, especially considering your background, both between like sort of being at the large strategic companies and startups and sort of what that life is like. Before we do that, a lot of our audience is just getting to know you. Give us a little bit of background about who you are, what kind of experience you have, and then more importantly, I think, how did you get in this industry? Because nobody graduates college and says, I'm going to go into medtech, unless it's Henry Peck. It's the only person I know who knew was going to be in med device was Henry Peck.
Well, you can possibly add me to that list as well.
Oh, so really? Okay.
I had a similar path to yours in that thinking I wanted to be a physician, and then ended up having a few experiences in college, spending time shadowing, and actually physicians talked me out of going into the industry. And basically at that time just said, hey, healthcare is a business. You're going to be on the business side of healthcare either way. So one option would be you could go remember your 20s and go straight into the business side of things and virtually end up in the same place. So was all focused on medical school until the end of my junior year, then made a pivot and actually came across a program at GE Healthcare where I started my career. And it was called their Technical Sales Leadership Program. So it actually was going into a, direct program selling, at that time, a full line of radiology equipment for GE Healthcare. And the whole, it was an 18-month training program just to get you out of the college environment and ready to, fast track 10 or 15 years so that I could be out doing a job that most people were in their, mid 30s or 40 doing. So add me to that list with Henry, and I'll be in a group with him anytime.
Fantastic. Yeah, Henry's great. So from there, like, what did your career kind of look like? And you served in both like sales and marketing roles. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so spent about 6 years at GE Healthcare in that first round. Just great experience. And I know we'll get into some topics of spending time at a large strategic versus a startup and what are some of the differences. For me, I'm incredibly grateful for that time. It just gave me the opportunity to have that broad foundation. There was a huge amount of expertise available in the company, just incredible people that I worked with. So lots of great mentors and also sponsors that I could find along the way and get really deep in expertise. So lots of resources in a big company. Super thankful for that time there. But then actually pivoted, left GE Healthcare to go to a 4-person startup, which was in the financial services industry. So we were actually, the 4 people all came from GE Healthcare of all things, and really just saw a niche in the market that wasn't well covered by GE Capital, was the financing arm of the company then. And so we were willing to do non-traditional financing structures where the hospitals had some interest, just things that weren't being done by GE or the large banks, and we thought there was a market for. So actually left there to go to a startup, spent a few years there. There were some accounting rules that changed that made that business less relevant. So ended up leaving there to go to Roche Diagnostics, which is another great, wonderful company, had the best experience there. And then GE Healthcare recruited me back after Roche Diagnostics, and then startups since then. But you'll see there's been a theme here of spending time at big strategics, going to startups and back and forth, honestly, which is rare.
Yeah, and that's why I was sort of excited to have you on the show. And most recently you are a VP of commercial over at Mindera, correct? Congrats, Absolutely. You guys had a big round raise, 73 mil. I read the article in the Wall Street Journal and everything. So really exciting. And for those who don't know about Mindera, essentially it's a medical robotics company who's venturing into the world of ultrasound. I'll leave it at that. If anything, if you're a listener of the show, go back to episode 205 or 6, I think. And we have an interview with Josh DeFonso, who's the co-founder and the CEO. So congrats on landing in another really great place.
Great things to come from in there. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited for you guys. It's going to be really cool. So let's get into it. So, you know, I think the one thing that I always tell people when it comes to starting their career is like really understanding like what your personality is and who you are, right? And so a lot of times, people who are startup people move into, the corporate world because they're like, I want a little bit more stability, et cetera. They go there, it doesn't work for them. People from corporate world go to startup, it doesn't work. And then there's people who are able to do both and do well. And of course, there's people who do both and are terrible at both, So what's your take?
Quick commercial break for marketing leaders and sales leaders. I don't have to tell you this, but it's worth reiterating that the time clinicians have to meet with medical reps is limited. You know this and feel this. It's been a challenge for med device sellers for decades. Now, with the rising workloads and patient care demands, clinicians' times are shrinking even more. And the window for your sellers and your sales team to meet with these clinicians consists of pretty much just minutes in a busy hospital hallway. The reality is your sellers have to make every second count or someone else will. They must be concise, they got to be efficient, and use highly relevant information to make the most out of these brief interactions. Showpad is all about focusing your sellers on the art of selling, which is about building trust and relationships. And while there's science, the Showpad solution handles the behind-the-scenes prep and follow-up work to make your team more effective. The best part is that you get insights on content and training performance so you can make strategic decisions and invest more in what works based on data. Showpad helps your sales and marketing teams spend their time in more productive, high-impact ways with a multiplying effect on your revenue results and growing your pipeline. So to learn more, go to showpad.com/State of MedTech. Now, let's get back to the show.
Yeah. So I hear people categorized simply into one or the other. And in some ways it drives me crazy because I do think it's possible to be successful in both. At the same time, I do understand there's certain tendencies that make you more suited for one versus the other. But I think it's a little intellectually lazy when someone gets pegged. And I'm talking about in hiring decisions. If we are, say, at a startup recruiting for a particular position, I've been in the room where someone says they're a big company person, can't hire them. And I think that is too simple. And the truth is always much more nuanced than that. So it depends on what do we need. Sometimes a startup is a place where they need a little more process and someone that's actually done what you're doing before. In a big company, you get a lot more deep expertise. In a startup, you get a lot more broad experience. It's extraordinarily fast-paced. And you have all of that accountability. So you go from strategy to decision to action and results very, very quickly. But there's also a whole host of people. If you look at, some people certainly start their careers in startups and spend their whole time there. There's people like you and I both that have experience in large companies and may have started there and then moved up into the startup space. So I'm happy to go into some of the other differences I see between, there's probably, 10 or so major differences between the two paths. But my core message is don't write off talent just because they're one or the other. And, I refer to it in the way of, hey, let's not, as a startup leader now, let's make sure we're not writing off people that have only spent their time at big companies. But let's also not do it the reverse. So, either way, you can have, there's certain skill sets that are going to make you successful and can make you successful in both that are, translatable to both.
No, I completely agree. And I think I agree with you a lot on that in the sense that it bugs me a lot as well that like our industry jumps to conclusions and is a little bit intellectually lazy when it comes to the hiring process. I completely agree with you on that. And not just in terms of like big company versus startup mentality, but even things like, I've seen really talented executives who made it to like final round interviews, one specifically, and they didn't end up going with him because he didn't have any cardiovascular experience. And I'm like, well, if you have experience like commercializing technology, then like that's all you need. I mean, I get it when sometimes they're like, oh, they don't come from medtech. That I can understand, but like this nuance of like, oh, we need like an interventional cardiovascular person, and this person only did regular cardiovascular. Like,
Right.
that doesn't make sense to me, you know?
Absolutely. And outside opinion, there's times where you do need expertise. And then here's what matters in that scenario. Did that executive that got passed over, if there's a great team underneath that person that knows that specialty and care area, that's good enough, because that particular executive probably is bringing some leadership and experience and judgment and business acumen that was needed at that company. So it's just another, you want to be thoughtful about hiring individual people, but it's also the team around them. And you don't want a team of clones. And I've also seen it in a past experience where we had that. And if you have a team that has all very similar experience or insular, which happens a lot and kind of been in so many different areas of healthcare, but in most of these areas of healthcare, people stay in that for a career, whether it was radiology where I started, and people go from beginning to end of their career often in radiology, or whether it is, in really any of the other areas. Some, if you're in ortho, perhaps you stay in ortho your whole career. So there's a complement to not having, to having that depth of expertise. That's hugely important. And in no way am I undervaluing that. But there is also a value of having seen it done different ways. So I think about that in terms of not just the industry, but also I personally believe it's valuable to have experience from multiple companies, because you're going to see things that go really well at each company and parts of the culture that you want to emulate. And you're going to see things that you want to change. And then you have the opportunity to change that entering a new organization.
I have an interesting question for you. Yeah. So, you mentioned about and I agree with you. It's good to get experience in both like large companies and startups. Completely agree with you on that. If you're talking to somebody who's like just starting out their career and they had a choice between, let's just say a great startup like Mandera or something similar, where you have good leadership, good technology, etc., or a great corporation like, let's say, an Intuitive. Okay. Yep. Which one do you tell them to start out with, and why?
All right. So here's what I would say is there isn't a blanket answer, because it depends on the person. Because it really depends on what's their skill set, what's their mindset, what's the environment they're looking for. Those are the three things I would want to ask them. Just like any good salesperson, I'm not going to give you a prescription before we have a diagnosis. So I would want to understand what that individual is thinking. That said, I'm not going to dodge the answer here. So here's how I would counsel that person.
I'm with you.
Yes, when I would understand more of what they're looking for. So thinking of, flexibility versus specialization. If you're looking to go really deep in a particular area, a large strategic could be better. If you're looking to get very broad experience and learn to be agile and flexible, there's no question a startup is going to be better, because you're going, especially if you're really early, you're going to have to wear multiple hats. You're going to learn different things. You're going to stretch outside of your area of expertise, even if you're early career. So that is one point. Another is risk tolerance. So this is, more commonly known, but certainly startups can be high risk, high reward. There's maybe not the same safety in big companies as has traditionally been thought of. Certainly there's upsizing and downsizing that happens at big companies. So it's not totally risk-free over there, but there is absolutely a higher level of risk tolerance you have to have and have to be able to set up your life around if you're going to go into a startup. And all you need to do is look at the numbers, the success rate to know that. And because I've been a part of multiple startups, there have been successes and there have been failures. And you have to be willing to know that. And it is unlikely, if you're going to be part of multiple startups in your career. Look at the best founders out there. They don't have 100% hit rate unless they've only done one and been successful in that one. So other things to think about, there's speed of execution and deliberation. So in a startup, just went through this with some strategic planning we were doing at Mandera yesterday. you truly go from designing what it's going to be to having that in place potentially the same day or tomorrow. And you see the results of your decisions and actions so clearly because of the speed with which you're making it. And then, of course, you have the accountability, which goes along with that. On the big company side, there's the deliberation that happens in those organizations. And frankly, the huge established organizations have more to lose. So it makes sense to have more deliberation that happens there and more governance and ways to protect from risk. Few other things, thinking about, resource availability, there are certainly more resources at big companies, but there's also some strings attached to those resources. So there's not endless resources at any big company, as anyone working for one knows. And then if you're at a startup, boy, do you have to be scrappy and think about, one of my colleagues here at Mandera, Polly Ma, we were just at SNIS at a trade show, and she's there making a gelatin mold in her hotel room using the coffee maker for us to be able to demonstrate our robot under development the next day. There's stuff like that. You'd never imagine that you're using the hotel espresso machine for hot water to make a gelatin mold. I mean, it's just never in the job description, but you have a job to get done. You find a way to get it done and are super resourceful with what you have. And then there's, if you think about growth opportunities, certainly there's amazing career growth opportunities either way, but I feel like it goes back to what are you looking for? Incredible depth, maybe general management leadership opportunities. And that is found more often at a big company. And then at a startup, you're going to get, lots of opportunity for advancement, especially if you're there as it scales. And then probably like the last three things, startups are about innovation and big companies are about optimization. So if you think about, what do you do at a large strategic, you are optimizing and scaling processes already in place. What are you doing at a startup? Particularly my last one, you are disrupting an entire market or creating a market. And, those are just different. And then there's also the time horizon. So if you want to see the impact of your decisions, for better or for worse, it's going to be right there to start up because every day is existential. In a big company, sometimes you may not see the impact of the decisions you make for possibly years to come. So all those things I would say, think about where do you truly fit there, but also make sure that you're not pegged as one or the other for your entire career because there's a lot in there. There's not like a right or wrong. It's not better to work for a startup or better to work for a large strategic. It's just, what are you looking for? What's the growth opportunity you want at that time?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Earlier in my career, you mentioned about making sure you don't get pegged. So that kind of leads you into like professional brand. And I'm wondering, in your opinion, how do you manage that? So like for me, as an example, I think after my first startup, which I was there for a few years, I went to another company for a year and a half, and then was moving on. And a recruiter who thought I'd be a great fit for a role, because even now, but especially back then, it was just rare to find people with marketing experience in robotics. She came back and her thing was like, "Oh, there's this concern because you look like a job hopper." And I was like, "I've worked at like 2 or 3 companies and they're startups. Like, what is that? What do you mean job hopper?" And so like, sometimes it's really difficult to manage that. So like, how do you think about managing your professional brand? And unfortunately for me back then, even though I was active, LinkedIn wasn't like much of a thing. It is now though. And so how do you think about managing your professional brand and leveraging it so that you're able to grow with your career the way that you want?
Okay, so there's 2 paths I'm going to go down based on the experience you shared. So first, I would say it is, it's interesting how we need to make sure to not hire in our own image. So I will say early in my career, I had that same bias that recruiter gave you, which was I stayed in roles for a longer time and was biased towards that, whether it was right or wrong. But I got frustrated at times watching others come in. If you're in a long selling cycle capital environment, if it's a 2-year deal, then what you're closing today or the quarter or second quarter or third quarter after you get hired is off of the work done of your predecessor. So when I would see people come in and out in roles for a year or 18 months, if you're in a long selling cycle environment, it frustrated me to see that, because I felt like you should stay through the consequences of your actions and decisions and not capitalize on someone else's work. So I just carried that personal bias with me, and like that recruiter, and I'm just being vulnerable here about my own 5 C's, which I have since corrected, was, to look at that. So I might have had that same feedback and said, man, this is a concern. If I've never seen a promotion at the same company, if every time you make a move, it is to a new company. That was also when I was in the big company world, where it was very predictable path, and this is what you do, and then you get promoted to this role. So I don't carry that same judgment anymore. And sometimes you love doing particular work. And if we go back to the startup example, say you love taking a product through, clinical and regulatory approval. If that is your passion, you're naturally going to need to move on to the next. If you don't want to do something else in your career, then once you bring something through and have approval, then you're likely going to move on to the next company that is going through that same process, if that is what you love in your career. So one thing, try not to hire in your own image, and try to have openness to other careers or other paths. Second, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but what made you change?
What made me change that bias?
Mm-hmm. You said you had that bias, you said you changed. What made you change?
Yep. So seeing the talent that so we just take away that bias and work with and hire great people that had the opposite of the profile that I thought was the right profile. That's what made me change. So like the evidence is there. So you're great at what you do. Doesn't matter that you moved on a few different times early on. And so that doesn't take anything away from the results that you would bring to a new company. So just seeing, sometimes you get a little brainwashed if you've only been one place of the way things are done there. And there's a whole world and expertise outside of that.
Got it. And that makes sense.
Yeah. And then the other thing I would say, you asked about managing your professional brand. People spend a lot of time on this, and just my own experience, and when I counsel people that are more junior in their careers, everyone starts thinking about, how do I look good to those above me? And not that that's not important. So you certainly want to be aligned with what your direct leader wants out of you, and be known to leaders. If you're looking to get promoted, you want to be known to leaders above you in the organization. But where I think people get that wrong sometimes is to forget what their peers have to say. So when I think about being in the room where promotions are decided, or, decisions about people, what matters so much more than the average person thinks is, what do their peers say? Are they someone that makes everything around, they just make everything easier because they're there? They're willing to do some of the work that needs to be done that doesn't get the glory, but they make the team better, and their peers rave about working with them? Or do they spend all of their time focused on only what the boss thinks or the leadership thinks, and they are a terror to work with on the team? So it sounds so simple and so obvious, but it really, if early career people, and look, this isn't isolated to early career. This certainly has, some people that have been in the workforce for a long time. If you're spending all of your time and focus worrying about what your boss thinks, you're doing it wrong. And you need to think about, what kind of a teammate are you? To me, your brand is what people say when you're not in the room. And that's what matters. So when they're in the room talking about who's going to get whatever, whether it's a promotion or whether it's an equity award or your rating on a performance review, how you behave as a teammate to your peers matters so much. And it's just undervalued, in my opinion, or thought of. It's just not right at the top of consciousness when people think about, how to behave to get their superiors to think they're doing a great job.
Got it. What if your team sucks?
The team that's working for you or the team around you?
A team around you. Yeah, if the team is working for you sucks, it's on you actually. But if the team around not good, and you can take the definition of not good in any way that you like. What's your recommendation to a professional at that point? What do you do?
Yeah. Well, so one thing, I don't know if you're a big basketball fan, but I will say I am a huge podcast fan and well, I'm not a huge basketball fan. I take lessons from all areas of life. So if I think of like the ultimate teammate, I think of Shane Battier and what he did. So statistically, there's a great podcast. So just different space than yours, obviously, but I love Work Life with Adam Grant. And so he did a podcast about the problem with all-stars. And he focused on a few different areas, but one of those was talking about Shane Battier and his philosophy. So he wasn't the best athlete on the team, does have 2 NBA championships to show for the end result, but he spent all of his time studying the analytics, knowing, okay, I'm not going to be the best athlete out there. What can I do? In his words, I can make it incredibly hard for the coaches to take me out of the game, and I can make it statistically more likely that they are going to win the game if I am out there on the court and not on the bench. And he made all of that come true. So what did that mean in basketball? It meant he was willing to do some of the stuff that the star players and at the team he won the championships on, had, as you're very familiar, I'm sure, had 3 star players. You can't have a team of all star players and be successful because someone has to do the work that doesn't get the same visibility, but is equally important. And Shane made a career out of doing it that way. And he would say, like, he's like the no stat player they talk about. But in the end, what's most important? Winning championships in basketball. And he got that done by being willing to do what, the star players were not focused on, which is what makes them a star and their stats that get tracked as a result of that. So
I love that.
Yeah, it's a great listen. So interesting and so applicable in other areas. And think about that back to sales too. I've been a salesperson or commercial leader my whole career. So what matters at the end of the day, just like in sports, it's wins and losses. Did you meet your operating plan? Period. So nobody cares if your team is winning. Nobody cares what role you played in it, just like Shane would say. So I might be doing some less exciting work sometimes. And frankly, in my daily life today, I could be doing activities from what like an inside sales rep would do to what a senior leader of a company does all the same day because it's stuff that needs to be done, frankly, all in the same hour, because that's how you roll at startups. There's nothing above you. There's nothing below you. You just do what needs to be done without any ego associated with that. And, we are obviously pre-commercial, so there's no operating plan or winning deals right now because of the stage company where we are. But through the rest of my experience, again, nobody cares what role you played on the team as long as the team is winning. And all they see is that cohesive team is finding a way to win.
Got it. This reminds me of the conversation that we had yesterday about, you asked me this question, which is like, do you know what the difference between a rock star and a superstar is? And I'm like, actually, I don't. And I thought it was really fascinating. And so maybe you can explain that, because I feel that I completely agree with you. And I think that people who are starting out their careers make the mistake of thinking that if I like just knock it out of the park all the time, I do all these things, I get a lot of, I get noticed a lot, then that'll equal career advancement. But a lot of times it's not.
Yeah. So first I will define it because some of your audience may not know what the difference is. Yeah. So this is all Kim Scott, who's the author of Radical Candor. This is her ideas and concepts, not mine. So all of this is her definitions, but I can explain her work and it's absolutely worth. She's got great content out there. She's got some, I know there's some videos online for her describing the difference. So worth listening to and digging into. But the short version, so defining them first. A rock star is someone that, for me as a leader, there's someone that doesn't want your job, doesn't want your boss's job. They are reliable. They are consistent. They are happy in the role they are. What they bring to your team is a source of stability. They drive excellence in their team. They are content where they are, and they are not looking to get promoted, be put in a new role, or additional responsibility. So then now let me describe what the difference is for a superstar. So superstar, they change everything. They are the face of growth for the company. They're ambitious. They're looking for the next challenge. They have a steep growth career trajectory. They are definitely a source of growth for the team based on what they bring, and always hungry for new opportunities and change. The reason Kim spent time defining these two is that you need both on a team. So when you are designing a team, you must have people that are in both modes. And she also says something very profound, which is make sure that you don't label people, just like we don't want to label people startup or big company person. Don't label people for their full career as either a rock star or a superstar, because you can go between modes. And first, maybe I'll talk about how you manage them. And then second, I'd be happy to share, my own experience, because I've been in both modes. I'm the same person, same individual, same professional, but because of life circumstances, I've spent time in both categories. So first, for how do you manage them? You need to be careful as a leader to not systematically undervalue rock stars, because your superstars are going to come into your team. They are ideally going to leave you better than they found you, in Kim's words, but they're short term. And you do need to have stability on your team and have that excellence that rock stars will bring. And I think if we look at how to manage rock stars, and maybe more specifically how not to manage rock stars, so you want to make sure, again, you're not systematically undervaluing them, but also when you find one of those people, make sure it's their dreams, not yours. So if you have a superstar managing a rock star, don't assume that what they want to do is move into your job or the next promotion. And, I did work for one organization that was very much, you are up or out. You're either growing and getting promoted or out. And for a period of time, they were not interested in having people stay for roles in a long time. And, thinking about it from Kim's lens, like that's honestly terrible. It should be eliminated and not the way to have high performing teams. So, making sure if you say for a rock star, hire somebody that doesn't care about their craft, and then they're just focused on short-term results, 18 months in a role to have results and move on to the next one, and say they're in a customer service role, you're going to break the spirit of the rock star that you do need on your team, because you have somebody that doesn't truly value their craft and how good they are at it. And then, again, this point about people aren't just for the full career in one mode or the other. So I've had times in my career where I've stayed in the same role multiple years. I talked about that bias earlier of wanting to see results through and own, for better or for worse, own the results of my actions. But also just on the personal side, there was a time period when I had my third child, had a very high risk and scary pregnancy. And it was from the beginning complicated and not going well. And he ended up being born 9 weeks early and had to be in hospital for 6 weeks. So I can tell you with certainty at that time, when we were focused on just him living and his outcome, that is not a time period in my life where I was interested in taking on extra work. I was interested in maintaining, once I came back from maternity leave, maintaining what I needed to do for excellence in my current role. But the thought of being promoted at that time and taking on additional work stress would have been a nightmare to me. And I was working for an organization that supported that and was happy to let me continue excellence in my current role and not push me for the next thing at a time period in my life where it just didn't make any sense. And then again, there's other times, more recently, I've been on a steeper growth trajectory and been interested in growing and taking on new assignments more so than some earlier times in my career.
Got it. Yeah, I really admire how you've sort of managed your career alongside like being a working mom, and you mentioned this a little bit to me. How's that evolution sort of changed you, and like what have you learned? How are you different today compared to like when you first had your kids and stuff? Because I know that a lot of women are working moms and are trying to juggle both a career and being a mother and a wife.
Yeah. So the short answer is I am a work in progress and trying to be better. So if I think about earlier in my career, and again, I'm coming through the sales world where it's all about results, and results are in black and white because it's all your performance to your operating plan. Earlier in my career, I never wanted to stick out. I never wanted to bring up the fact, and I mean, obviously people could tell I was a woman, but didn't ever want to lean on that and wanted to minimize any difference there. And then also same thing with, once I had kids, look, there's all sorts of challenges of, my husband had a really important role too and traveled for work. And sometimes we both had to be gone for work at the same time. And rather than ever saying, hey, this isn't going to work for me because we're going to have someone else come stay with our kids, whether it be grandparents or a babysitter, which is, probably a little bit more acceptable now. I just never talked about the challenge and just made it all happen behind the scenes. And so when my oldest is 17 now. So when I look back at that time period, I think, you know what? I'm doing the rest of the women that come behind me no favors by making it look easy and never talking about it. And it doesn't help the next group to maybe get to this place earlier in their career. Now, I think we've had some cultural shifts since then. And that was, I'm not putting that on the company. That was on me that chose to make it, I didn't really get involved with any women's groups and just wanted to be like, no difference. Nobody see me as any difference. And I'm going to work as if I have no kids. And I'm going to try to be a mom as if I don't work, which is, by the way, an impossible proposition. So, what do I do now? Leading teams now and in my past couple of roles, rather than if I need to be at something for my kids, either that something, urgent has come up or it's a doctor's appointment or whatever, something I'm passionate about, I don't just block my calendar and say, hold or, make up something on my calendar. I'm clear about what it is. So if it's something wildly important and I need to go see my 9-year-old is going to have a program at school that it means the world for him to go there, then I'm going to say out loud, I am going to be gone for these couple of hours today, and I'm going to go to his school for this program. And just normalizing that and hearing it as a leader makes it easier for other people to do so. And, going back to 20 years ago, maybe I would have been more willing to say that. And then look, when things come up, your family can't, and please know, I'm sure you do. Obviously, it's not like I only, family doesn't always win over work. It goes back and forth. You have trade-offs on both sides. But I think the most important thing is it can't be that work wins 100% of the time over your family, or that you feel like you can't share and bring your whole self to work. Look, that's a huge part of me. I have 3 kids that I adore, and I'm an involved mom and parent with them, and I don't shy away from that. And I also am at a place in my career where I know it doesn't make me a worse employee just because I have kids, and I can get it all done, maybe messily sometimes, maybe, they're never all in balance, But in the end, I can do work that I'm super proud of, and I can have a family that I adore and am also super proud
Well, when you look back, do you feel like there are some things that you specific things that you did that you wish you may have done differently?
of. There always are. I mean, if I look at, and this is kind of going to the same theme as, there's not a right or wrong big company versus startup. I think you have to find what works for you in terms of balance. So for me, I am an integrator. So I can go back and forth I could be between meetings and then need to make a call to schedule a doctor's appointment for one of my kids and then go right back to the next meeting. And I don't have to have that very defined line between work and personal. So for me, it's just all about work-life integration and having flexibility in my role allows me to do that. There's other people that doesn't work for. And I work with a lot of people that are super passionate about, I will not work at night and I won't work on the weekends, but I'm going to give it one hell of an effort Monday through Friday from early in the morning till, late at night or till dinner time, whatever your hours are. But do not contact me in the evening. So that works for them. What works for me is going back and forth between the tasks and then being able to have that flexibility for life events or things that are incredibly important to me. And then I'll catch up on the weekend. And I build my life around ways to do that. But that is very much a personal preference. And I don't think anytime I hear someone preaching about a way that is the right way to do it, I think it's individual specific.
Yeah, I agree. I think I definitely agree that it's individual specific. And I think that, I don't know, I think since post-COVID, this whole idea of like work-life balance, like I don't believe in it. Because I feel that there's going to be, like, I think you said it really well, which is that there are going to be trade-offs. Like sometimes work is going to win, sometimes family is going to win. And that in general, you do your best to make sure that, I don't want to say the word, I just said it's not, there's no such thing as work-life balance. But I think, there's me, like, for example, for me, there are certain weeks where, like next week, I'm going to be traveling, I'm going to be doing different things. So it's like very work heavy. There's other weeks where like I'll take off early, I'll do more stuff with my family stuff. And so it's a constant thing, but I think it's specific to every individual. For me, I need, like, I work from home, I see my family all the time. I need to be away from them a little bit. Like at least once a month, I need to be away for like a day or two, Yeah. But not everybody's like that. I think you're absolutely right that everybody's different, Yeah.
Everyone's different. And then I agree there's no balance. So when I think about it, it's really like 3 legs of a stool. So what is happening in your work life? And you could either call it, not everyone has a family of their own yet, or maybe it's something in their future. So work life, personal / family life. And then I would make a third category of health. So for me, I think it's impossible to have all 3 going really well at the same time. What is important is that it's not always the same 1 or 2 that's winning because they directly pull from each other. So I've been really trying to focus on some aspects of my health and getting better sleep. And so, but the reality is that pulls from something else. So if I'm going to try to commit to sleeping another hour a night, then that comes from somewhere. There's either some part of work isn't getting done, or the 1 hour workout I want to do isn't getting done, or that's 1 hour less with my family. So we have the same 24 hours in a day. And so anytime you're prioritizing your most precious resource, which is time, and voting, your priorities are voted on by how you're spending your time, they do pull from each other. So there's times where, maybe my health and work are going great, but it's at the expense of my family, or maybe family and work are going great, and then my health is suffering. So I just try to be mindful of where I am in each of those categories, knowing that they pull from each other, but making sure it's not always the same one that has the top priority.
I love that. I completely agree. At least I like the stool analogy that you share, and I that definitely resonates for me. For me, like I was thinking about this actually today before our interview. That for me, like my number one priority for the last couple of years has been my health. And so that means like every day I got to do a workout. Doesn't matter how long it's going to take or if I do it late. Like today I had to push in meetings. I'm like, didn't get to work out, so I'm going to do that. So it's like working out, my nutrition, and then my sleep. And everything else is second to that. So that includes my family, because I feel that if I don't take care of myself from a health standpoint, my family's going to suffer. And something simple, I'll give you a good example that I think a lot of people don't realize is like, if I don't get a decent amount of sleep and I don't work out, I'm going to be tense. I'm not going to be a fun guy to be around.
Yeah.
You know? And I think people, the more, I feel like this goes back to what you started with at the beginning of this talk, which is like, everybody's an individual, everybody's different, but I think realizing your strengths and where you fit involves a lot of reflection as to like, who am I? You know?
Right.
So,
and it's so, what you mentioned is so true. You do show up better for your family and at work when your health is in the right place. So it's something that, I had years where I just, especially in my early career, where I was so focused on performance and making a name for myself that I didn't make time to work out because there was more I could do. There was another sales call I could make. There was another proposal I could make perfect. There was, one more thing. Maybe there was one more MRI I could sell. And that did help with performance. And I had some really strong performance. But you can't cram a workout. So you can't say you're the kind that, recharges on the weekend. You can't take a week's worth of workouts and do it on the weekend. That's not the same. That's not how it works. And sometimes you need to look, it takes more time. You mentioned nutrition. It takes more time to eat healthily and to cook meals at home. But that time is of value too. So it's, early on, I was like, I just don't have time for that. Work is everything. I was consumed with it. And now I do see the value of, prioritizing that. Even this morning, I could have spent more time prepping for this conversation. And instead I went and made sure I got my daily workout in because it was important to me and are probably going to show up better for this conversation, even though it meant an hour less to think about it or be ready.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, and I personally, look, Jill, I wanted to thank you for coming on. It's been a lot of fun. You're definitely going to be back on soon. But just as we kind of wrap things up, there's sort of a rapid fire. So this part you could not prepare for, but there's some like rapid fire questions I like to ask guests sometimes just for fun. And so you can take as long as you want to answer these, or as short as you want. So we'll get started. So first is, like post-pandemic, I think everybody got addicted to the feeling of like boxes showing up to their house. Like maybe it's just me, but like I talked to other friends of mine, and we were ordering something random every other week from Amazon. So in the last like year or so, like what's been like a really cool purchase you made from Amazon or it doesn't have to be Amazon, but somewhere online that's like under $100?
So with Amazon, for me, it's probably the volume. I live in an area rather than just one item. So it's embarrassing how often Amazon comes to my house, and with their, because I'm in a market where they can deliver within like 2 hours, then I have certainly had days where Amazon has come 2 to 3 times a day to my house. So I think what I love most is just the minute I think about something, I'm just in there in my Amazon cart and order it. Something that I've used recently, like a handheld travel steamer, has been helpful.
Handheld travel steamer, like for clothes and stuff.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great idea.
It is a great idea, and I haven't actually brought it on travel, but I have used it at home, and just recently came in handy because of my daughter going to homecoming and needed her dress had a few wrinkles in it. So it was like one of those. It was a material you can't iron, but was able to steam it. So I was like, thank goodness for that random. No, it is corded. There's power.
Okay.
But
it's a handheld. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. I should probably get one of those. That sounds like a great idea. Okay, that's good. Other one is, you mentioned Radical Candor, so we can't use that. But like, what are some books that you feel have influenced your career that you often gift to other people?
Yeah. So I will say, not just because I'm on your podcast, I will say my podcast listens are way more than I listen on Audible versus actually reading. I consume a massive amount of books too, but they're all on Audible because I just find, trying to fit everything into my busy life, I don't prioritize or find time to just actually read a book. But if I'm doing something mindless, like driving or folding laundry or doing all the boring things in life that we have to do, I am 100% of the time listening to a podcast. So it's something we have these great Lunch and Learn series at Mendera where you talk about something like, what is it that you know more about than anyone else in the company? Or what are you particularly passionate about? So for me, I did mine on the power of micro-learning and podcasts and gave everyone my full podcast listen list. Of course, yours is on there, as are a bunch of, variety of other topics, not all healthcare specific. Some are more, leadership specific. So I will say that's what I do more than books. But to answer your question specifically, The Go Giver is a great book. I don't know if you've come across that one.
I have that somewhere up there. Yes.
Thanks. Yeah, you've got quite a library back there, but it's one of those that written in a different way than I wouldn't have, defined all of the laws as they describe it in the book, but just philosophically, it's how I think about life. I'm always thinking about these aren't the words of the Go Giver, but how do you be like a lifter, not a leaner? How do you give more than you take? Like everybody's been around people that are just emotional vampires or are just so challenging to work with and always need something and have very little to give. And it's just core to my philosophy that just to be that. So the Go Giver that's going to be focused more on your own generosity, and not because you'll get paid back more in return, but because it's just core to what you believe. So it's a great one if others haven't heard it.
Fantastic. And then lastly, aside from mentors, who are some people that you want to kind of give a shout out to that you really admire them a lot? They've helped you along in your career, whether it's professionally or personally. Who comes to mind?
Yeah, there are so many along the way. So one of my favorites, I would say, that really pushed me because I talked about rock star status versus superstar status. So there is someone named Ted Dunham that was the region president that I worked for at GE Healthcare. He's with a different organization now and has just had an awesome career. But he pushed me hard to consider that I could be doing more and really to exit that rock star status. So I know I was just saying, be careful how you manage these people, but he knew I had it in me to do so much more and really wasn't settled until I did so. So just a great guy, great leader. I owe a lot of my leadership to him, and I'm super thankful that he was so thoughtful, giving me experiences along the way, even when I didn't. One thing in particular, he asked me to lead a board of my peers at the time, and I was thinking, again, I'm all focused on sales and performance, thinking, hey, this isn't going to help me make my operating plan this year, which is how I get paid, which is how I get measured. And he just kept pushing me towards that and said, there's going to be things you do in this role that are going to matter for the rest of your career. And when you need to organize some leadership retreat that you're doing down the line, or when you need to have this experience, this was many years junior in my career, when you need to design a comp plan for a company, you're going to have done all of these things and you're going to be able to come back to these experiences. And he was so right. And it changed the trajectory of my career. And I will always be thankful to him for doing that. So.
Fantastic. Well, Jill, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a blast. Looking forward to having you back on. If you're listening, be sure to give Jill a follow. She is on LinkedIn. And with that being said, I'm your host, Omar Khatib, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this
this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.